Thanks everybody for your time today. My name's Nick Butcher and I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer at CarbonCrop. And what we're doing at CarbonCrop is basically working to get landholders across New Zealand recognised for the carbon removals that are occurring on their farm. And I'll sort of run through what that means in the context of the Ignition Pilot Farm Network, which we're very excited to be a part of. The motivation for sort of farmers and society in general is really to try and solve this equation. If you're a farmer, you might see this equation as actually kind of a frustration that you have to solve it, but increasingly through supply chains and through national level climate change targets, people are being asked to figure out pathways to net zero. What net zero means is all of your emissions minus all of your removals should come to zero. We don't have a lot to do with the emissions part of it. We focus on making sure that you're recognized for the carbon removals that are occurring within your operations. And this is not something that's entirely new. Like, the carbon markets have existed, especially in New Zealand, for some time. But what we've seen repeatedly is that there are challenges in engagement within that market, and that means for landholders, lost opportunities. Many farmers are aware that there is a market potentially for carbon. They may have trees on their farm, which they understand could be eligible for incentives in that market. But when they actually start trying to get recognised for those incentives, they run into these various issues around compliance obligations and cost of assessment and the risks associated with it and the complexities of modelling, how you actually sell the carbon at the end of it, what the registration process is, how you map it, ongoing obligations. Routinely, we found amongst our early customers within the space that they tried to find their pathway through that, and it just became too hard and they gave up, and everybody's busy and there's a million things competing for your time. This doesn't make it to the top of the list, which is a shame because the opportunities here, as you'll see later on, can be very significant. What we aim to do with CarbonCrop is package up all of that complexity into a form which the complexity is not completely gone away. It's important to understand it, but it's at least simplified and automated as much as possible and presented in a way that supports easy decisions. And that works across not just the compliance market, which is the emissions trading scheme you've most likely heard of, but also activities that you might have under voluntary markets or in connection with net zero product. If in the future you were to use some of your ongoing carbon removals in your forest to create a net zero wool or sheep or beef or dairy product, our system supports that. And it also allows you to interact not just with the carbon markets, but with the advisors that you might need to help you with these markets, including forestry and ag consultants, potentially project financiers, primary sector processors who are actually taking your goods from the farm and turning them into these reduced emissions products, and then the consumer brands whose hands they're ending up in. We offer a full life cycle support for this. These projects are complex and it's like basically a forestry activity. It lasts for a very long time, and it includes sort of initially engaging with the opportunity, understanding what your opportunities could be, assessing your land, modelling the various scenarios that you need to consider, selecting the scenario that you'd prefer given the trade-offs, collecting evidence, preparing a registration application, ongoing performance and projections once you're registered so you can understand the potential commercial returns, reporting and compliance obligations, and then audit and sales around all of this, which might sound like a hell of a lot of extra complexity and paperwork that you don't want to have to deal with, but there is money at stake here and commercial returns available. And what we've aimed to do and have now helped a lot of landholders with is minimizing the overheads and the complexity and the uncertainty while still allowing you to realize the benefits, because, as I said, many people we saw were shut out of this market through the complexity. And if we get this to work, sort of stepping back a bit into the broader kind of society level and with impacts for social license for farming, this working well means that there's more incentives available to you for on-farm restoration activities, which means that we get more forests restored, which means that they become more forest incentives available because there's a positive feedback loop there, which means there's less carbon in the atmosphere. That's the reason these incentives exist. Our experience in the space, we've now assessed more than 1.9 million hectares of land, paid out more than $20 million to farmers for carbon removals on their farms through the ETS, and helped more than 250 farms register within the ETS. So you might wonder why I'm speaking to you now in the context of a pilot farm network opportunity for early stage solutions. That's because up until now, the platform as I presented it has only been available within CarbonCrop. Like, we have used this internally to serve our customers in a forestry services consultant form. We're now making it available to everybody within the industry, starting with landholders, to enable them to use the tool directly, which means that it's much more scalable and much more economical. So who's this for? If you're sitting there wondering if it's for you, really it's for everyone who's interested in their on-farm carbon sequestration. So hopefully that's pretty much all of you, but I understand if you've got too many things on the to-do list over the remaining 3 months of the year. Our goal is to make it possible for everybody to be a carbon farmer if they want to be. Don't think necessarily I'm converting a giant paddock to pine trees. That's actually sort of the opposite of what we're about. Most of our farms are native forest restoration on properties and regenerating native bush. So it's really something that fits as an integrated activity within a sort of mosaic farming system, rather than us advocating for mass forestry conversions. And our goal is to help all of it be recognised properly, especially where it's already ongoing. In terms of the potential revenue and the motivation for this, I've just got a few quick snapshots of our farmers range everything from, I think our smallest property is 4 hectares, and that's actually not a farm. That's somebody who's just got a couple of hectares of native bush that they decided to register on their lifestyle block, up to sort of 10,000 hectare plus farms that have registered hundreds or thousands of hectares in the system. But in terms of potential return, so this is a sort of close to 2,000 hectare sort of mixed hill country sheep farm. They've got around 88 hectares that was deemed eligible, and their estimated return from that next year, net of costs, is about close to $60,000. At the smaller end of the spectrum, and not a farm, but a nature reserve, just to show that this is like really, we are trying to get everybody to be able to be involved in carbon markets. 200 hectare reserve on Banks Peninsula, they're anticipating $13,000 return next year. A small 85 hectare beef finishing block up in Golden Bay, they're expecting around 6,000 return, which might not sound like a lot, but this was largely for ongoing activities that were already underway, and we enabled them to access those funds quite economically. In terms of how you participate in the program, we've made it as easy as we can. To get started, all you have to do is just go to our website, which will be made available through the Pilot Farm Network, and select your land for analysis. This costs you nothing, and it takes literally about a minute to get started. From there, you can use our AI-assisted tools to classify your forest. This is free. There's no charge for it. We're looking to get you to the point that you have an understanding of what your opportunity would be before we start asking you to commit any funds to the activity. And then when the Ignition Pilot Farm Network special deal comes in, is we provide a full detailed financial model and report of all of the carbon farming opportunity on your land. Usually we charge $400 for that per farm. Through the PFN, we're making that available for free in return for the feedback that we're looking to get from you through the Pilot Farm program of, was it useful? How could it be made more useful? Did you like the result? And then finally, if you choose to proceed with a carbon farming activity on your land, or if you've already got one in process, so our platform's actually got a range of functionality for existing ETS registrations as well. We're offering a 3-month free trial and a 30% discount over the first year through the Pilot Farm Network for the project. And that's, you can leave it at any time, but that we support with review and analysis of your forest areas and the registration process right through to acceptance within the ETS. Thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate that you've got a lot on and that this is time out of the middle of your day. And thanks also to Ignition and Ravensdown with PFN for making the opportunity available to us.